Set the dog down, Tammy, or you can walk out that door tonight and never come back. The security guard's radio crackled at his hip. The lobby smelled like wet marble and copier toner, and Baxter was shaking so hard against her chest she could feel the shape of every rib. His milky blue eyes were fixed on nothing at all. Tammy Reeves, 47 years old and 2 months behind on rent, tightened her arms around him. "You'll have to fire me then. Before we go on, drop a comment telling me what part of the world you're listening from and hit subscribe so you don't miss stories like this one. To understand how a cleaning woman ended up carrying a company's abandoned mascot past a wall of glass at 3 in the morning, we have to go back 17 days to a Tuesday night in downtown Charlotte, when the rain came down so hard the traffic lights blurred into red and green smears, and Tammy pushed her cart through the loading dock service door the way she had for 20 years. She almost walked past the whimper. It was small, half lost under the drumming of the rain on the metal roof, and she was tired the way only a cleaning shift makes you tired, the kind of tired that lives in your knees. She stopped anyway. She was raised by a mother who used to say a person who ignores a small sound in the dark grows deaf to the big ones. Tammy set the mop down, wiped her hands on her navy apron, and looked behind the dumpster. The dog was curled on the concrete with his side pressed to the metal for warmth. He was small, tan, with long, droopy ears and a white patch down his throat, the kind of hound you might see on the porch of a farmhouse 2 counties east. His fur was matted with rainwater and something darker along one shoulder. When she crouched, he lifted his head, and she understood at once why nobody had taken him inside. His eyes were the color of skim milk, cloudy from edge to edge, and they did not track her hand. "Oh, honey," she whispered. She offered her fingers, low and slow. He sniffed once. Then he leaned his chin against her wrist and stayed there, like he had been waiting his whole life for a hand to lean on. Curtis Boone came around the corner with his flashlight bouncing. He was a thick-set man in his 60s, retired from the county sheriff and now spending his nights in a folding chair by the freight elevator. When he saw Tammy on the concrete, he sighed the way a man sighs when he has already had this conversation with himself. "That's Baxter," he said. "You never met him?" "Never seen him in my life. He used to live upstairs, marketing floor. 2 years, maybe. Some big shot up there adopted him as a stunt, took pictures with him for the ads, put him in the little videos they play on the elevator screens. Company mascot." Curtis rubbed the back of his neck. "Then his eyes went bad. Vet said he'd be blind inside a year. And well?" He gestured at the dumpster, at the wet dog, at the whole soaked story of it. "Nobody wants a blind dog in a corner office. He sleeps out here, sleeps in the loading dock most nights. Guys on the day crew leave him scraps. He knows the smell of a lunchbox better than his own name." Curtis clicked his tongue. "You want to help him, ma'am? You'll have to ask upstairs. He belongs to the company on paper. There's a whole file." Tammy stayed on her knees for a long moment. Baxter's chin never moved from her wrist. She could feel his ribs go in and out, small and quick. Her mind was already doing the math that always ran under her thoughts, the one she never let anybody see. The rent, the light bill, her daughter Maya's community college tuition, the $8 or $9 in her checking account that had to last until Friday. There was no room in her life for a dog. There had never been room in her life for anything but the next shift. "What time do the upstairs offices open?" Curtis grinned like he had won a small bet with himself. 8 sharp, but if you're going up, wear the good uniform. They notice." She rode the bus home in the dark, with her forehead pressed against the cold glass, and she could still feel the warm weight of a chin on her wrist. She had not held anything that small and trusting in her hands since Maya was a baby, and Maya was 19 years old now, halfway to a nursing certificate at the college over on Trade Street. Tammy climbed the concrete steps to her apartment and let herself in as quietly as she could. Maya was asleep at the kitchen table with a textbook under her cheek. Tammy pulled the light cord in the kitchen the way you pull a chain in a church, careful and slow, and then she stood over her daughter for a long minute just to watch her breathe. The next morning she stood in front of her bathroom mirror and pinned her name tag to the front pocket of her cleanest apron. Her hair was still damp from the shower, and the light over the sink was flickering the way it had flickered since December. She whispered her own name once, the way she did before she asked anything of anyone. "Tammy Reeves," she said. Just Tammy. She rode the elevator to the 30th floor at 7:45. The doors opened onto a hallway that looked like the inside of a magazine. Pale wood, glass walls, a tall vase of white flowers on a shelf so narrow you could tell the flowers cost more than the shelf. The receptionist looked up at her apron, then at her name tag, and her smile went thin. "Deliveries are on 22, ma'am." "I'm not delivering. I need to speak with the person in charge of the mascot." "The what?" "Baxter, the dog." The receptionist blinked twice. Then she picked up her phone. 15 minutes later, Tammy was standing in the doorway of a corner office watching Greg Ashworth pace with a headset pressed to his ear. He was maybe 38, wearing a shirt without a tie and shoes that clicked, and he was arguing with somebody about a launch date. When he noticed her, he raised one finger, mouthed one moment, and made her stand there for 4 more minutes while he closed the call. On the wall behind him hung a framed print of Baxter as a younger dog, ears up, tongue out, the words, "We rescue our own," across the bottom in a font that looked expensive. "So," Greg said, dropping into his chair. He had the practiced warmth of a man who was going to say no in a friendly voice. "You're the one who wants Baxter." "Yes, sir. I've been cleaning this building for 20 years. I found him last night behind the dumpster in the rain. He shouldn't be out there." Greg laughed. It was not a mean laugh. It was worse than mean. It was the laugh of a busy person who thinks he's being generous by not being annoyed. "Look, Miss Reeves, I love that you love the dog. I really do. But Baxter is, technically, a brand asset. His likeness is registered. Legal would have to sign off on any transfer of custody. We're in the middle of a rebrand cycle and things are complicated right now. Come back Friday. I'll have someone look into it." "Friday, then." Friday. On Friday, he was in a meeting she could not enter. His assistant, a young woman with a headset of her own, told her to come back Monday. Tammy said thank you and went back downstairs. She did not tell Curtis. She did not tell Maya. She washed dishes at home that night and did the crossword by lamplight, and she did not sleep well. On Monday, a young man in a slim grey suit met her in the lobby. "Miss Reeves, I'm Nick Farrow. I work with Mr. Ashworth. Walk with me." They walked in the small triangle of shade behind the fountain out front, where the employees smoked. Nick Farrow had a face that seemed built to say no politely. He had the same watch as Greg, only cheaper. He had a tie clip shaped like a little compass, which Tammy noticed because her mother had owned one just like it. "So here's the situation," he said. "I know you were told to come back today, and I appreciate you being patient, but the decision has been made, and I want to be straight with you so you can move on. The answer is no. The company is going through a full brand refresh. Everything is being reviewed, and the leadership has decided that a blind mascot is, in the words from the meeting, off message. Off message. Those are the words that were used, yes. So what happens to him? He'll be rehomed through appropriate channels. There's a shelter partner we work with for exactly this kind of situation." "Which shelter?" Nick Farrow paused a beat too long. "I don't have that specific information in front of me." Tammy looked at him a long time. He was maybe 26 years old. His shoes were shined. That little compass tie clip was turned slightly to the side. She wondered which direction it thought it was pointing. "He was in a supply closet on 18 last night," she said quietly. "Somebody shoved him in there so the client tour wouldn't see him. He had a sore on his shoulder from the door. I cleaned it with warm water from the janitor's sink. Do you know what a dog sounds like when he thinks he's been left in a room forever?" Nick Farrow did not answer. "Off message," she said again. Then she went back inside to push her cart. That night she took her time on 18. She waited until every last laptop had winked to sleep, until every last shoe had clicked out the far door. She opened the supply closet by the copier bank, and there he was, sitting up straight in the dark, with his ears cocked toward the click of her key. She sank to her knees on the tile. "Hi, sweetheart, I'm back." Baxter shuffled toward her voice on the cold floor. She checked the sore on his shoulder. It was worse, red and raw. She dampened a paper towel in warm water from the sink at the end of the hall and dabbed at it. He did not flinch. He only pressed his forehead against her chest and breathed the long, slow breath of an animal that had been holding it a long time. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered. "I'm sorry it took me this long." There was something around his neck under the fur, and at first she thought it was a knot, but when she brushed the fur aside, she felt the thin ring of an old leather collar, thin as a shoelace, buried under 2 years of new growth. She worked her nail under the buckle. On the underside of the tag, worn almost smooth, were 2 letters etched by a machine, E and M. She sat back on her heels. Baxter's tail did a small flat wag against the tile. "E and M," she said. "Who's that, honey?" He did not know. He only knew her voice. She fed him half of the ham sandwich she had brought for her break. He ate it with the slow, careful care of a dog who did not know when the next meal would come. She sat with him for 20 minutes past the end of her legally allowed break, and she talked to him about small things, about the weather, about her daughter, about the way the moon looked through the tinted window at the end of the hall. Then she closed the closet door as gently as she could, walked back to her cart, and finished her floor by memory, because her eyes had been full for the last 3 hours. Her daughter Maya was awake at the kitchen table when Tammy got home, hair pulled up in a messy bun, glasses low on her nose. Maya was 19 and had her father's serious eyes and her mother's mouth. When Tammy walked in, she looked up and read her face the way a nurse in training reads a chart. "You okay? There's a dog at work, Maya." "Okay. He's blind, and they left him behind the dumpster in the rain, and nobody wants him." Maya closed the textbook slowly. "Mom, I know. Mom, the rent, the books, my clinicals. I know, baby. You bring one more mouth into this apartment and I don't know how we can't, Mom. I know." They sat in the silence between 2 people who love each other and can count. After a while, Maya reached across the little table and put her hand over her mother's hand. Tammy's skin was rough from the bleach and the cold, and Maya's was smooth and warm, and neither of them said anything for a long time. "I saw his tag tonight," Tammy said finally. "There's letters on it, E and M, from before the company had him. Somebody loved him. Somebody named him." "You can't fix everything, Mom." "I don't want to fix everything, baby. I want to fix one thing." Maya did not answer. She squeezed her mother's hand once and got up to boil water for tea. 2 floors above Nick Farrow's office, there was a young copywriter named Leah Barton, who had been at the company 11 months. She had a small cubicle in the corner of the marketing floor and a photograph pinned to the wall of a golden retriever she had grown up with. Leah had been the one who wrote the caption under Baxter's picture in the campaign that ran on the elevator screens for 8 months straight. The caption said, "We rescue our own." Some mornings, she rode the elevator up and read her own words on the little screen and felt proud of them. She had once described herself, in a job interview, as somebody who cared about the story behind the story. That week, she saw the story behind the story. She was proofreading a press release about the company's new logo when she saw an email chain go by on the shared communications drive with the subject line "Mascot Transition, Off-Message Language." She opened it because everybody at the company had free access to that drive. It was the kind of casual carelessness that comes from a place where nobody thinks anybody is watching. In the chain, Greg Ashworth had written that the blind dog was, quote, "not something we want in the deck for the shareholder meeting," and had asked whether the shelter partner they used for other retirements could be, quote, "quiet about the handoff." Nick Farrow had responded, quote, "We'll handle." Attached to the chain was a photograph of Baxter sitting in what looked like a supply closet, the door partially closed, his cloudy eyes turned toward the crack of light. It had been sent to prove he had been, quote, "secured for the client tour." Leah Barton sat at her desk for a very long time reading that chain. Her golden retriever from the photograph on her wall had died 2 years ago on a rug in her mother's living room, surrounded by everyone he had ever loved. She thought about that. Then she thought about the cleaning woman she had passed in the elevator 1 week earlier, the one with the navy apron and the pinned-up name tag, who had ridden all the way to 30 in silence with her lips moving as if she were rehearsing something. Leah did not sleep that night either. She lay in her bed with her ceiling fan making a soft clicking sound, and she thought about all the times in her life she had let something slide because it was not her fight. She thought about the girl in middle school she had failed to defend. She thought about the roommate in college she had failed to warn. She thought about the caption she had written, "We rescue our own," and how it had probably been printed on a bus that was driving past the loading dock right that minute. She got out of bed at 2 in the morning, made herself a cup of instant coffee, and opened her personal laptop. She forwarded the entire chain, along with the photograph from inside the supply closet, to a reporter at the Charlotte Observer named Devon Marsh. She used her personal email. She used a laptop that did not belong to the company. She sent it from a coffee shop 3 blocks away, over the free wireless, at 7:43 the next evening. Then she deleted the sent email from her personal folder and walked back to her cubicle and finished proofreading the press release, and she did not tell anybody, not even the person she was sleeping with, what she had just done. Devon Marsh, the reporter, was a thin man in his mid-30s with a mustache he was trying to grow out and a habit of tapping his pen against his teeth when he read something interesting. He read the chain twice. Then he called his editor. 3 days later, the front page of the Charlotte Observer carried a photograph of Baxter, cloudy eyes and all, sitting under the caption, "We rescued our own," and a headline that said, "Mascot dog called off message, left in closet, corporate emails reveal." Underneath was a smaller headline, "Cleaner who tried to adopt him was turned down 3 times." By 8 in the morning, the story was on the local news. By 10, it was on the morning show out of Raleigh. By noon, it was on the wire, and it was traveling faster than anyone at the company knew how to catch. By 2 in the afternoon, Greg Ashworth's phone had rung 114 times. Greg did not come out of his office all afternoon. At 3:15, the chief executive's assistant walked into Nick Farrow's office and told him to bring the file on Baxter, and Nick Farrow looked her in the eye and said, in a voice he had never used before in that building, "There isn't a file. I told him not to put it in writing. He did it anyway." The assistant blinked at him. "Bring what you have." That evening on the loading dock, Tammy pushed her cart past the freight elevator and Curtis Boone waved her over with a folded newspaper. "You seen this yet?" She had not. He handed it to her. She read the headline twice. She looked at the photograph of Baxter, of his cloudy eyes turned toward the light, and she put her hand over her mouth. She was so quiet Curtis thought for a moment she might be having a stroke. "You didn't do this?" he asked. "I did not." "Well, somebody did, and they used the word closet, and they had the photograph." Tammy sat down on an upturned milk crate and read the whole story with the paper spread on her knees. When she was done, she folded it carefully and put it in her cart under a stack of trash liners, as if she thought somebody might come to take it away. Curtis, where is he right now? They moved him back to 18 this morning, before the story went up. Take me. Curtis took her. Baxter was in the supply closet again. He heard her voice through the door before she even reached for the handle, and by the time she opened it, he was already sitting up straight with his ears forward, tail thumping softly against a bucket. Tammy scooped him up. He weighed almost nothing. "We're going," she said. "Right now. I don't care." Curtis stood in the doorway. "Tammy, I have to write it up if I see you carrying anything out of the building without paperwork." "Then write it up, Curtis." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Baxter. Then he looked down the hallway at the empty offices and the framed poster on the wall that showed a group of smiling employees holding a sign that said, "Family." He wet his lips. "I need to escort you to the lobby, Mom. Company policy." "Okay. That way I can note in the log that you were escorted." "Okay." He walked her to the elevator. In the elevator, neither of them said a word. Baxter pressed his face into the crook of her neck and made a small sound that was not a whine and not a sigh, but something between them. They stepped off onto the ground floor. And that was where the story loops back to the beginning. The security guard by the revolving door, Greg Ashworth stepping out of the other elevator behind them, his face the color of chalk, his tie loose, his phone in his hand. "Miss Reeves, set the dog down." She did not stop walking. "Miss Reeves, set the dog down or I will call the police. That is stolen property." The lobby was full of people, the way lobbies of downtown towers are always full at 5 in the afternoon. Commuters, delivery riders, a woman waiting on a leather couch with a boy on her lap. Every one of them was looking now. The security guard at the door had one hand on his radio and the other spread flat as if he were trying to slow her down without touching her. "Set the dog down, Tammy," he said, "or you can walk out that door tonight and never come back." The lobby smelled like wet marble and copier toner and something else she could not name until later, when she realized it was her own adrenaline. Baxter was shaking against her chest, ribs sharp through the thin fur, milky blue eyes fixed on nothing at all. She tightened her arms around him. "You'll have to fire me then." Greg Ashworth crossed the marble floor in 5 long strides and stopped in front of her. Up close, he did not look like the man who had laughed on Monday morning. He looked like a man who had been on the phone too long with people who had never called him before. "Miss Reeves, please, let's go to a conference room. We can talk about this." "I am done talking. I have talked to you 3 Mondays in a row, Mr. Ashworth. I have talked to Mr. Farrow. I have talked to your receptionist. I am taking this dog home tonight. If you want to call the police, call them. I will sit on the sidewalk with him under my coat until they come. Miss Reeves." The revolving door spun, and a woman with a press badge and a camera stepped in from the sidewalk. Behind her was a man with a video rig on his shoulder. Devon Marsh, the reporter with the crooked mustache, stepped in third, notebook already open. Greg Ashworth looked at them the way a man looks at a truck he did not hear coming. "Mr. Ashworth," Devon said pleasantly, "would you like to comment on why the woman who tried to adopt Baxter 3 times has just been publicly threatened with the police for trying to remove him from a supply closet?" Greg Ashworth's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Tammy turned toward the door. She walked past him, past the security guard, past the woman on the leather couch who was now standing up and applauding, past the boy who reached out to touch Baxter's ear as she went by. She walked out onto the sidewalk and into the yellow light of a September evening, and Devon Marsh's photographer took the picture that would run above the fold the next morning. A small woman in a navy apron with a small tan dog under her chin, both of them lit gold by the setting sun. That should have been the end of it. It was not. By 9 the next morning, the company had issued a press release saying that Baxter had, quote, been placed with a long-time employee under a temporary care arrangement while the appropriate ownership transfer is being processed. By 11, Greg Ashworth had told his own board of directors that Tammy Reeves had, quote, removed a piece of company property in violation of protocol and against direct instruction from a manager. By 1 in the afternoon, Tammy's shift supervisor at the cleaning contractor, a nervous man named Ray Bettis, who reported to the tower's facilities office, called her at home and told her she was suspended without pay, effective immediately, pending investigation. Maya was at the kitchen table when the call came. She watched her mother's face, and she knew before her mother hung up the phone. She stood up. He fired you. Suspended, without pay. For taking home a dog they threw out. For removing property without a paper trail. Maya sat down again. How long? He said the investigation would be 4 to 6 weeks. Ray sounded scared, Maya. This isn't Ray. This is the tower calling Ray. Baxter was asleep on the couch under an old towel. He did not know anything about the phone call. He only knew that a warm room smelled like soup and that he was not being asked to move. Maya put her head down on the table. Mom, rent is due in 9 days. I know. And my books. I know. They sat that way for a long time. Then Maya raised her head and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Okay, she said, okay. I'll go get another shift at the diner. Baby. Mom, I'll go get another shift at the diner. It's what we do. We figure it out. That's what we do. Tammy started to answer and could not. She reached across the little table and put her hand on the back of her daughter's neck, the way she used to when Maya was small. And Maya let her head rest into her mother's palm. And for a moment, nothing in the world was outside that kitchen. The next morning, Tammy took Baxter to a veterinary clinic on Central Avenue that a neighbor had recommended, one that ran on a sliding fee scale. The vet was a woman named Dr. Anita Delgado, small, gray-haired, with reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. She examined Baxter for 45 minutes. She looked at his teeth, his eyes, his shoulder sore, his hips. Then she scanned him with a small, handheld device. He's chipped, she said, still looking at the screen. Registered. Registered to who? Dr. Delgado turned the screen toward Tammy. On it was a name, a phone number that was disconnected, and an address in West Charlotte. Ellen Marsh, the vet said, registered 11 years ago. Tammy went very still. She sat down on the little metal stool in the corner of the exam room. Baxter, on the table, turned his head toward the sound of her breath. You know her? The vet asked. I did. A long time ago, she trained me. When I first started at the cleaning company, she was our lead. She was the one who walked me through the tower on my very first night. She held the elevator door for me and told me to always take the stairs down, because the down direction is where you catch yourself falling. Dr. Delgado looked at the screen again. She's listed as the primary owner. There's no secondary on the chip. She died, Tammy said. 12, 13 years ago. Cancer, it moved fast. She had a son. He would be the one to release the chip. Otherwise, technically, this dog is still hers on paper. Tammy stared at the little tan dog, with his cloudy eyes turned toward her voice. She thought about Ellen Marsh. Ellen had been a big woman with a big laugh and a slow, deliberate way of pushing a cart. She used to bring a little dog to work with her on late shifts sometimes, when her son was away on a delivery run, a puppy she called Bax, short for something. Tammy could not remember what. That was the small tan puppy that used to sit in the wire basket of Ellen's cart, ears flopping, as they rode the elevator up to 22 together, and Ellen sang along to the country station on her hip radio. That was Baxter. 20 years ago, the small tan puppy in Ellen Marsh's cart was Baxter, and now, blind and old and unwanted, he was on a metal table on Central Avenue with a woman he had last known as a young trainee. and he had leaned into her voice on the wet concrete behind the dumpster because somewhere in the old memory of dogs, her voice was safe. She put her hand on his head. "Hi, Bax," she said, and his tail did a small, remembering thump against the metal table. The vet cleared her throat quietly. She waited a full minute before she spoke. "Miss Reeves, I've been doing this work for 31 years. Dogs remember voices from puppyhood their entire lives, especially the voices that were kind to them when they were small, especially the ones that made them feel safe. What you're seeing is not a coincidence. He came to you because you were in the room 20 years ago when he was born safe." Tammy could not speak. Dr. Delgado gently unhooked her reading glasses and let them fall against her chest. "There's no charge for today," she said. "You bring him back Monday, we'll start the eye drops and the antibiotic cream. And if you need a letter from me about the medical neglect, I can write one that will make a very large law firm regret ever having heard your name." That afternoon, Tammy drove out to the address in West Charlotte in Maya's old sedan. The house had been repainted. A young family lived there now, with a car seat in the back window of a minivan and a small pink bicycle in the yard. The woman who came to the door had never heard of Ellen Marsh. She had bought the house 4 years ago from an estate. She was very sorry. She did not know where the son had gone. Tammy sat in the sedan for a long time after that with her hands on the steering wheel. She had the feeling that she was carrying 2 stories now, not one. She was carrying the story the newspaper had told, the story about the closet and the off-message dog and the cleaning woman who would not go away. And she was carrying the older story underneath it, the one nobody but her and Baxter knew, the one about a woman with a big laugh and a wire cart and a puppy named Bax who used to ride to 22 on the swing shift. She started the car and drove home. On the way, she stopped at a copy shop and made a photocopy of the chip record. She did not know yet what she was going to do with it. She only knew that it mattered. The next morning, Devon Marsh called. "Miss Reeves, I want to run a follow-up. Would you sit for an interview?" "I would. Anything you want to say for the record?" "I have a story that isn't in the first article. It's not about them. It's about him." Devon Marsh drove to her apartment that afternoon and sat at her kitchen table with a notebook and a small recorder. Baxter slept on the linoleum by his shoe. Tammy told him about Ellen Marsh, about the wire cart, about the puppy named Bax, about the elevator to 22 and the country station, and the slow, deliberate way Ellen had of pushing through the world. She told him about the chip. She told him what the vet had said about the voices dogs remember. Devon Marsh listened for an hour. When she was done, he closed his notebook. "Miss Reeves, this is not a business story. This is a life story. I want to write it that way, if you'll let me. But I'll be honest, the moment this runs, they will fight you harder. Right now, you're just a woman with a dog. The moment there's a name like Ellen Marsh in the paper, you become a woman with a claim." "I understand. Do you have anyone helping you with the legal side?" "No." He tapped his pen against his teeth. "Let me make a call." That night, while Devon Marsh was on the phone with a lawyer in another part of town, something happened that Tammy would remember for the rest of her life. She was washing her single plate at the kitchen sink when she heard a soft knock on the door. She thought it was Maya coming home early from the diner. It was not. It was Greg Ashworth. He was in a raincoat with the collar turned up, and he looked as if he had walked here in the rain from the bus stop, even though a man like him would never have taken the bus in his life. He held a bakery box in one hand. "Miss Reeves, may I come in?" "No, sir." "I understand." He nodded as if she had confirmed something. "I brought this. It's cookies. I don't know if that's the right thing to bring." "It is not the right thing to bring." "No. I'm sorry." They stood there in the open doorway a moment, the light of her apartment on his face, the light of the hallway on hers. "I would like to make you an offer, Miss Reeves. Off the record. From me, not from the company. I want to write you a personal check, out of my own account, for $15,000. I would like you to sign a very simple statement saying that you understand there was a miscommunication about the dog and that the company acted in good faith. You keep the dog. The suspension goes away tomorrow. $15,000 is a lot of money, Miss Reeves. I know what your rent is." Tammy looked at him a long time. "How do you know what my rent is?" His eyes flickered. "I looked it up." Baxter came around the corner of the kitchen at the sound of Greg's voice. He did not wag his tail. He stood very still in the doorway between the kitchen and the front room, and he lifted his nose, and his ears went back flat against his skull. It was the first time in 3 weeks Tammy had seen him afraid of anything. "Mr. Ashworth." "Yes." "Get out of my hallway." "Miss Reeves." "Get out of my hallway, or I will call the police, and I will call the reporter who has been writing this story, and I will tell them both that you came to my door in the rain to threaten me with a check." "I'm not threatening you. You are standing in the rain at my door with a bakery box and a number you looked up in a file. That is the definition of threatening a woman, Mr. Ashworth. Now go." He looked past her at Baxter. His jaw worked once. "You have no idea what you are doing. You have no idea what this is going to cost you. I know exactly what it is going to cost me. Go." He turned and walked down the hall. Halfway down he stopped and looked back. "For what it's worth, Miss Reeves, that dog does not know you. He does not remember anybody. He is a dog. He is a piece of property. Whatever story you are telling yourself, it is not real." "His name is Baxter," she said. "His mother's name was Ellen Marsh, and she trained me on my first night in your building, and she pushed a cart through your lobby for 11 years, while people like you did not learn her name. And he leans into my hand because I stood next to her when he was small. That is what is real, Mr. Ashworth. Go home." She closed the door. She stood with her back against it for a long time. Then her knees started to shake, and she slid slowly down the wood until she was sitting on the linoleum, and Baxter came over and pressed his warm side against her hip, and she sat there in the flickering kitchen light and cried, without making any sound at all. The lawyer Devon Marsh had called was a young woman named Priya Nair, who did pro bono animal welfare work out of a small office off Independence Boulevard. Priya was 29, sharp, with hair she kept in a low bun and a pair of dark red glasses she pushed up her nose when she was concentrating. She came to Tammy's apartment on a Saturday morning with a folder and a laptop, and Baxter walked straight to her, sniffed her ankle, and lay across her foot. "That's a good sign," Priya said, half smiling. She read the chip record, she read the newspaper article, she listened to Tammy's story about Ellen Marsh, and about Greg Ashworth in the hallway with the bakery box. Priya's face changed only once, on that last part. She wrote a single line in her notepad and underlined it twice. "Miss Reeves, here is where we are. The company has, in writing, described this dog as a brand asset. That means they treated him as property. Under North Carolina law, property abandoned in a way that endangers the animal, left in a supply closet, exposed at a loading dock, denied care for a diagnosed condition, is subject to relinquishment. If a court agrees, they lose all claim. And with the chip evidence, there's a second thread. The original owner is deceased, and the surviving next of kin, if we can find him, has a stronger claim than the company ever did. The company plucked this dog from a shelter years ago after Ellen Marsh's death. They took him. They never legally adopted him properly because the chip was never updated. They used him in advertising, made money off his image, and then discarded him. This is not just a story. This is a case. And Ellen's son? That's the thread we pull first. And Miss Reeves, one more thing. If Mr. Ashworth comes to your door again, you call me first, before you call anyone else. Do not open the door. Do not accept anything from his hand. He has just given us the second strongest piece of evidence we have. Priya spent the next 3 days finding him, Ellen Marsh's son. His name was Danny Marsh, and he had moved to Asheville after his mother's death and taken a job as a paramedic with a small county service in the mountains. He was 34 years old. When Priya called him and told him the story, there was a very long silence on the other end of the phone, and then he said quietly, "I thought about that dog every week for 11 years." He drove down that Saturday. Danny Marsh was a big man with his mother's shoulders and his mother's eyes, and when he walked into Tammy's apartment, Baxter lifted his head from the linoleum, stood up on his old legs, and walked in a slow, crooked line toward the sound of him. Danny knelt down. Baxter pressed his forehead against Danny's chest and stayed there for a full minute without moving, and Danny cried, the quiet kind of crying that grown men do when nobody has to see it. "Mum used to call him Bax," he said when he could speak again, short for Baxter. She named him after her grandfather. He used to sit in her cart, right up front, and she'd sing to him. He was 3 months old when she died. I couldn't take him. I was working nights. I was 23 years old, and I couldn't feed myself. I couldn't feed him. I took him to a shelter over on Freedom Drive, and I cried the whole way home. I have thought about him every single week since. Every single week." "He was upstairs," Tammy said. "The whole time, 2 years. Upstairs from where your mother used to push her cart." Danny closed his eyes. "Miss Nair told me what these people did to him. I want to know one thing. Do you want to keep him?" Tammy looked at Baxter. Baxter was pressed against Danny's leg, tail thumping softly against the linoleum, absolutely certain that he had found what he was looking for. "I want him to have you," she said. "But he found me for a reason. He knew my voice." "He knew your voice," Danny said, "because you were with my mother. He remembers your voice from when he was 3 months old, and everything was safe." "So we share him," Tammy said. Danny looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded. "We share him. He lives with you when I'm on shift up in the mountains. He rides down with me on my off weeks. He never sleeps alone again, ever. And we sue those people together. My name goes on the paper next to yours. My mother pushed a cart through that building for 11 years. She died on a couch waiting for a health plan that should have covered her 3 years earlier. They can pay for what they did to her dog." Priya Nair at the kitchen table was already opening her laptop. The case against the company was filed on a Wednesday morning, and by Wednesday afternoon it was on the local news. Priya Nair stood on the courthouse steps with Tammy on her left and Danny Marsh on her right, and Baxter sat on the concrete between Tammy's feet with his cloudy eyes lifted toward the sound of the reporters, and she read a 2-paragraph statement that ended with the sentence, quote, "You cannot pluck a mother's dog from a shelter, print his face on a bus ad, and then throw him behind a dumpster when his eyes go bad. Not in this state, not in this country, not on our watch." The clip ran on every local station that night. By Thursday morning, it was on the national morning shows. By Friday, there were people standing on the sidewalk outside the Glass Tower in downtown Charlotte, some of them with signs, some of them with their own rescue dogs on leashes. A woman had brought a folding table and was handing out cups of hot coffee to the crowd. A boy had drawn a picture of Baxter in colored pencil and taped it to a lamppost. Somebody had spray chalked on the sidewalk in blue chalk the words, "We see him." The company's stock lost 11% in 3 days. Inside the tower, something else was happening. On Thursday afternoon, a woman on the 5th floor, who had never spoken to Tammy Reeves in her life, brought her a homemade pound cake in a Tupperware container. On Friday morning, 3 of the day shift cleaners walked into Ray Bettis's office as a group and said, in flat, unified voices, that if Tammy was not reinstated by Monday, they would not be at their carts on Tuesday. Ray Bettis, who was a nervous man but not a stupid one, took the message upstairs. On Saturday, the board of directors of the company called an emergency meeting. Nobody outside the room was told what was said in that meeting, but on Sunday afternoon, Greg Ashworth was placed on administrative leave. On Monday morning, Nick Farrow resigned, quote, to pursue other opportunities. Or, on Monday afternoon, the chief executive of the company, a woman named Karen Whitfield, who had never been in a room with Baxter in her life, called Priya Nair personally and asked whether Miss Reeves would meet with her privately. Priya said no. She said whatever needed to be said would be said in front of a judge. And she said the number, when it came, had better begin with a comma in the right place. For 4 days, there was silence. Then, on Friday morning, the lawyer for the company met them in the marble lobby of the tower. He was an older man in a grey suit, with a folder under his arm and the practiced posture of a man who had lost cases he did not talk about. He handed the folder to Priya. "Full transfer of ownership," he said. "No admission of wrongdoing. A one-time care fund of $8,000 marked for the animal's veterinary needs. A car to take Miss Reeves and the dog home tonight if she would like it. All parties agree to release and the matter is closed." Priya opened the folder. She read it. She closed it. She handed it back. "No." The lawyer blinked. "No? No. First, the ownership is not yours to transfer because the chip has always belonged to Ellen Marsh. Second, $8,000 is what your marketing floor spends on catering for a launch party. Third, no admission of wrongdoing is not on the table when your company left this dog in a supply closet for 6 hours during a client tour, and the photograph exists. Fourth, Miss Reeves has been suspended without pay by a contractor who reports to your facility's office, and that suspension has cost her 3 weeks of rent. Fifth, one of your senior vice presidents came to her apartment door in the rain to offer her a personal check to sign a false statement, and I have that in a sworn affidavit signed this morning. If you would like to talk seriously, come back Monday with a number that reflects the truth and reinstate Miss Reeves with back pay by close of business today. If you do not, we file the amended complaint on Tuesday morning, and we add Mr. Ashworth as an individual defendant, and I put that affidavit into the public record." The lawyer's throat moved. "I'll need to make a call." "Please do." He made the call from a bench across the lobby. It lasted 11 minutes. When he came back, his forehead was shiny at the temple. "Reinstatement with back pay today. Number to be discussed Monday. Meet at 9. 9 sharp." He nodded. As he walked away, he stopped and turned back. "Off the record, Miss Reeves. I'm sorry. My daughter has a rescue mutt. She showed me the picture of you carrying him out the door. She said, 'That's what a good person looks like.'" He looked at Baxter. "For what it's worth." "Thank you," Tammy said. He walked out the door. That night, Tammy sat on the fire escape outside her kitchen window with Baxter warm against her leg. Charlotte was quiet in the way cities are quiet on a Friday night when the rain has just stopped. All the neon reflected in the wet street. All the sounds softened. Baxter's ribs were not sharp against her hand anymore. He had gained almost 4 pounds in 3 weeks. His shoulder sore had healed to a small pink patch under new fur. His ears were dry and warm. Maya came out through the window and sat down on her other side and handed her a mug of tea. "Mom." "Yes, baby." "Are we going to be okay?" "We're going to be okay. For real this time. For real this time." They sat in the wet quiet listening to the city. Baxter's tail thumped once, softly, against the metal grating. On Monday morning, the settlement came in at $220,000, split between Tammy Reeves as caretaker of the animal and Danny Marsh as heir of the original owner, plus a formal public apology from the company printed on the front page of the same newspaper that had run the first story, plus a 1-year mandatory ethics training for the marketing division, plus a permanent policy against using live animals in the company's advertising. plus a scholarship fund in the name of Ellen Marsh for the children of building service workers in Mecklenburg County. Priya took her fee and gave half of it back to a rescue in West Charlotte that had been struggling to pay its water bill. Tammy paid every bill she owed in full in one afternoon, sitting at her kitchen table with her checkbook and a pot of coffee, and Maya at her elbow crossing items off a list. Rent, current. Light bill, current. Gas bill, current. Maya's tuition for the fall paid in full. Maya's books, paid in full. A used Toyota to replace the sedan that had needed a new transmission for 2 years. A fund for Danny in Asheville to cover Baxter's care on his weeks. A savings account with a real number in it for the first time in Tammy Reeves's life. The rest she dropped into a glass jar on top of the fridge. On the front of the jar, Maya taped a piece of paper. On the paper, she wrote, in her nurse-in-training handwriting, "The Baxter Fund, for the next dog nobody wants." Tammy went back to work the following Monday, in the same navy apron on the same night shift, pushing the same cart through the same offices. She did not want to leave the tower. She had earned it, she felt, more than the men who had worked on the top floor. She rode the elevator to 18 and cleaned the corner where the supply closet was. She had made her peace with that closet. She had made her peace with the whole building. Curtis Boone was at the freight elevator when she came down at the end of her shift. He had a paper bag with 2 coffees and a folded newspaper. He handed her a coffee. "You saw the paper?" "I saw." "He resigned this morning." "I saw that too." Greg Ashworth had resigned quietly, according to a 2-inch column on page 4 of the business section. He was moving out of state. He would not be returning to the industry, according to a person close to the matter. The company thanked him for his years of service and wished him well. What the column did not say, but everyone at the tower already knew, was that his severance had been withheld pending an internal review, that his professional reputation in the city was finished, and that the daughter of the older lawyer in the grey suit had put on social media a picture of Tammy in the lobby with the caption, "This is what a good person looks like," and it had been shared, according to the count that morning, 178,000 times. "Justice," Curtis said, sipping his coffee. "Justice," Tammy said. They stood by the freight elevator, watching the rain come down on the loading dock through the open door. In the far corner, next to the dumpster, was a small blue plastic bowl with a little water in it. Curtis had put it there. He had been putting it there every night for a week, just in case, he had told her, in case there's another one. "Curtis, can I ask you something?" "Ask." "Why did you walk me to that elevator that night? Company policy would have been to stop me at the freight door." Curtis was quiet for a long time. He looked at his coffee. He looked at the dumpster. He looked back at Tammy. "I had a dog once, Springer Spaniel, name of Rusty. I was on the force and I was in a bad marriage. And one night I came home in a mood and I raised my voice at that dog, not my hand, just my voice. And you know what he did? He hid under the couch and shook all night and would not come out for me the next day or the day after. Took me a week to get him to come to me again." Curtis wet his lips. "He forgave me in the end. Dogs do. But I did not forgive myself. And I made a promise to myself, the night I got him to come out from under that couch, that if I ever again in my life saw a dog scared for no good reason, I would put myself between the dog and the reason." He looked at her. "That closet was the reason, Tammy. You were the between." She reached over and squeezed his forearm. "Thank you." "Thank you, ma'am. You did the walking. I just held the elevator." Danny Marsh drove down from Asheville that Saturday. He came into the apartment with a duffel bag, and Baxter, hearing the click of his boots on the linoleum, walked to him without hesitation and pressed his head against his knee. Danny laughed the kind of laugh a person laughs when their heart is too full. "Hey, buddy. Hey, Bax." They sat around the kitchen table that afternoon, all 4 of them, Tammy, Maya, Danny, and Baxter, under the table on his old towel, and they ate a chicken Maya had roasted, and they talked about things that were not the tower. Danny told them about the mountains, about a fire he had run to last month that had turned out to be a burned pot of beans on a stove, about a dog he had seen once at a call, a coonhound named Blue, who had refused to leave the porch of a house whose owner had been carried out on a stretcher. Baxter's tail thumped whenever Danny spoke his name. After dinner, Danny reached into his duffel bag and pulled out a small square envelope, soft with age at the corners. "I want to show you something." He opened it and slid a photograph across the table. The photograph was of Ellen Marsh in a navy apron, sitting on the loading dock behind the tower with a small tan puppy in her lap. She was laughing at something out of frame. Her whole face was in the laugh. In the corner of the photograph, blurry and small, standing behind her holding a mop, was a woman with dark hair pulled back and a name tag pinned to her chest. The name tag was too small to read, but the shape of the woman was unmistakable. "That's you," Danny said quietly. "My mum kept this in her wallet till the day she died. She said it was the day she trained the best hire she ever had. She said, 'That girl is going to be the one who lasts. That girl notices the little things.'" Tammy looked at the photograph a long time. Her hand shook, very slightly. "She said that. She said that." Maya put her hand over her mother's hand on the table. That night, when Danny had gone to sleep on the fold-out couch, Tammy and Maya stood at the kitchen window, looking down at the wet street. Baxter was on his towel between them. The neon from the bodega across the way lit the tops of the cars in pale pink. "Mom?" "Yes." "You know what you did." "I did what any person would have done." "No. You did what most people don't do." Tammy did not answer. She just looked at Baxter, at his cloudy eyes turned toward the sound of Maya's voice, at his ribs going in and out under the soft new fur. 6 months later, Leah Barton, the young copywriter who had forwarded the emails, quit the company. She took a job at a small non-profit that helped older adults foster shelter animals. She never told anybody at that non-profit what she had done, and she never told Tammy either. But once, at a fundraiser at a park where Baxter and Danny happened to be walking, Leah recognized them from across the field. She stopped. She looked at Baxter's cloudy eyes and his soft belly and his tail flag-thumping against Danny's leg. She put her hand over her mouth and she stayed on the far side of the field and she watched them for a long time, and then she walked to her car and sat with her forehead against the steering wheel until she could drive. Some good you do in this world is loud. Some good is quiet. A year after the night at the loading dock, on a Tuesday exactly like the first Tuesday, the rain came down again over Charlotte. Tammy pushed her cart through the service door and Curtis waved to her from his folding chair by the freight elevator. She waved back. She was 15 minutes early for her shift. She heard the whimper before she reached the dumpster. She almost did not stop. She was tired the way only a cleaning shift makes you tired, and she had her mother's voice in her head about small sounds in the dark. But she also had a life now, a daughter she was actually there for. A small apartment with a warm dog on the couch, a jar on the fridge, a Saturday drive to the mountains with a big paramedic and his big laugh. She had built a life at 48 that at 47 she would not have believed possible. But she stopped. She set down her mop. She wiped her hands on her navy apron. Behind the dumpster there was a kitten, small, grey, one ear folded, shivering. Its eyes were fine, just cold and alone. She scooped it up. She tucked it inside her apron pocket. She walked to the freight elevator where Curtis was already standing, holding open the metal gate. Another one. Another one. He handed her a paper towel. She wrapped the kitten in it, cradled inside her apron, and she rode the elevator up to 18 and washed the kitten's face in the janitor's sink. And she called Danny from the phone by the copier, and by the time she came out at 6 in the morning, Priya Nair had already found a foster home for a small grey kitten in South Charlotte, with a woman who had been on the rescue's wait list for 8 months. Baxter was waiting at the door of her apartment when she got home, tail thumping. She let herself in. She sat down on the floor of her kitchen, and he put his head in her lap. She put her hand on his warm back. Outside, the sun was coming up over Charlotte, and the wet street glittered pink and gold in the light. She thought about the woman she had been a year ago, on her knees behind a dumpster, with a shaking dog leaning against her wrist. She thought about the light in the closet. She thought about the letters on the tag, the E and the M. She thought about Ellen Marsh in her cart, singing along to the country station on the swing shift 20 years ago. She thought about a photograph in a wallet, and a young girl with dark hair holding a mop and a laugh that had lived long enough in one small dog's memory to bring him back across a city and up onto a loading dock and into her arms in the rain. She thought about how strange it was that the smallest person in the building had been the only one who was willing to see him. Some good you do is loud, and some good is quiet. Some good you do because you have a plan. Most of it you do because a small sound in the dark makes you stop. She kissed the top of Baxter's head. "We did all right, buddy." His tail thumped once, softly, against the linoleum. If this story moved you, take a second to tell me in the comments where in the world you are listening from. Tap the like button so more people find their way to Tammy and Baxter, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story of a small, kind person in a big, cold world.